She's my daughter. I brought her into life and kept her for years till I couldn't keep her no longer.
For parents, the memories of raising children are among the most precious. Lynn Arquette has no shortage of those with her daughter, Kristen Spires.
She was funny. I mean, she had a most contagious laugh. She always giggly. Everything was funny. That's my girl. Sometimes she can look serious, but then all of a sudden you look at her, she's laughing, cracking up. Yeah, that's my girl.
In May of 2010, Spires was at a party on Woodward Avenue in Big Rapids. It was the last time anyone says they saw her alive. Casey Nemeth and Brian Miller were two of the original investigators who worked Kristen's disappearance. They're now the sheriff and undersheriff of Mecosta County.
Once the names came out of the people that she was associated with or who brought her here to Big Rapids and where she was at, those names were familiar with us. With our investigations into multiple other things. And that was suspicious right off the bat. And just the fact that everybody that we were talking to basically didn't want to talk. Like they said, yes, I seen her, but then they're with this person. They passed the buck quite a bit.
And that didn't leave Nemeth or Miller with many leads to chase down.
There was a lot of hearsay, a lot of assumptions. I think this may have happened, or I heard that this could have been a factor, but nothing specific in nature or concrete that we could run with and do much with.
Nearly a year would pass until investigators found Kristen's body in a remote part of Mecosta County.
Then they found her in that state land. It took almost a year to find her. And they couldn't find anything because they put her in a hole. They dug a hole and put her in it.
For Miller and Nemeth, this was now a homicide investigation.
We had been pushing a homicide for quite a while after the first few months of her being missing and not using her phone, not using her any debit cards or anything like that, making no contact with family. As law enforcement, we instantly push or lean towards foul play.
Charges were eventually filed in Kristen's death, but later dropped after prosecutors say one of the people charged lied. Still, Nemeth and Miller believe they're incredibly close to solving this case.
A large group of people that we were dealing with through this investigation are no longer in the area. Have moved on and moved out. But there's not a day that goes by that we don't talk about this case. And if we can keep it out there for people to see and remember so she doesn't get forgotten and maybe somebody gets that conscience and is willing to come forward, that'll give us that little piece.
Now we're at a point where we have somebody that we believe is the key witness, and that person will not come forward because of the element that she's involved in is the same element that did this, and they're fearful of the streets more than they are crime. They don't trust the police, they don't too much, but they're more worried about what could happen to them if they do speak. And it's frustrating for us as law enforcement because we know it's there. And it's someone is more afraid of their neighborhood, I guess.
Frustrating too for Kristen's family.
I just want to know what happened, why, and who. I want somebody to stand in front of me and say, you know, something like, even if, I mean, it's not going to do me any good to have them make them apologize to me. It's just gonna, I want to see that person that did that. Yeah. I want to see what he looks like, or she, or it, or whatever, but yeah, I want to know why. Because that kid didn't have an evil bone in her body.
If you have any information about what happened to Kristen Spires, contact the Mecosta County Sheriff's Office. For Unsolved in Mecosta County, David Leiden, 9 and 10 News.
Dave was hanging out with some friends, and they were at one of his friend's house that was on the Green Lake Peninsula.
It's March 2nd, 1983. 18-year-old David Giannet is spending the night with friends near Interlaken in Grand Traverse County.
And then the group of them decided to go down to the Fireplace Inn, which was common for them. So they went down to the bar, hung out there for a while, and then towards the end of the night, they ended up returning back to that friend's house on Green Lake Peninsula.
That walk back up the peninsula would be one of the last times anyone would report seeing Giannet alive. State police have been looking into this case for decades. We were asked to conceal the identity of one of the troopers who has been part of the investigation.
But Dave was kind of the last friend that was hanging out there. He was talking to his friend that lived at that house and was talking about getting home sooner so that he could make it to school that morning, and was discussing kind of walking across Green Lake. That friend walked with him to the edge of the lake just to show him, that ice wasn't safe, you can't do that. And they ended up kind of talking him into not doing that.
With that, David headed south down the Green Lake Peninsula.
And that was the last time that he was seen. In days following, none of his friends had really heard from him. And so on the 7th, 4 days later, he was finally reported missing.
The Coast Guard and local dive teams did multiple searches on Green Lake, given one of David's last reported conversations. But those searches turned up nothing, and dives on the lake in the years since also came up empty, all but eliminating the possibility that David tried walking across Green Lake.
March was unseasonably warm that year, and so there wasn't even really ice on the lake at all at that time. And then follow-up interviews also showed that Dave was deathly afraid of the ice, and that typically would never walk across the lake like that.
So detectives were left to chase down other leads. There were rumors David may have left the area on his own, but there's no evidence to back that up, and all of David's belongings were left at the cabin he was staying in. There was also a tip that his body may have been found in Florida, but that never panned out. Detectives chose to reopen the case in November of 2022.
And we did get people that called in with further information, but it all is rumors. I mean, there's nothing that could be confirmed. There's nothing that we were able to solidify as being a legitimate lead.
Leaving investigators and David's family without any answers.
What happens now with this case?
I think we wait for somebody to hopefully have a conscience, and they come forward with some sort of information that they might have that can lead us in the right direction, so that we can give Dave's family some peace and some answers, and that Dave also gets that peace.
If you have any information on what happened to David Giannet, contact Michigan State Police. For 9 and 10 News, I'm David Leiden.
Greg had some vehicle issues and had parked his vehicle at a local establishment along M30, had gone home to make contact with his then fiance, and subsequently took his bicycle back to that establishment to apparently work on the vehicle.
It's 7 p.m. on December 12, 1991. Gregory McRoberts is riding his bike on South Meridian Road. It's the last time anyone would report seeing him alive. Detective Brent Benzing now leads the investigation into what happened to Gregory.
What happened next as he's riding his bike to get to where his vehicle is?
Well, ultimately, between points A and B, that is unknown to the perpetrator and the evidence that we have, but the evidence simply indicates that he was likely struck by a vehicle along the side of Meridian Road, his body then thrown into the ditch.
Gregory was reported missing on December 16th. His body was found several weeks later on January 4th.
There are some significantly deep west side ditches there that were water-filled, detritus and leaves and things of that nature that had, we believe, probably concealed the fact that the body was there, but located within close distance to the bicycle. as well as what we believe to be a debris field of the striking vehicle.
The evidence at the scene indicated Gregory was the victim of a hit and run. Detectives narrowed down the vehicle involved as likely being a light blue Oldsmobile Cutlass built between 1982 and 1987.
So there was lots of investigation, lots of rumor mills and things like that. Hit and runs are notoriously hard to solve simply due to the mechanics of how the crimes take place.
Then, in 2005, this case took a surprising turn as Gregory's family received a 2-page typewritten anonymous letter from the person claiming to be responsible. It reads in part,
"That moment is etched on my memory, and something inside of me also died, knowing what had happened and the pain that I had caused. To leave a son, wife, and children alone is an unthinkably painful realization."
The letter itself has been analyzed by 3 different statement analysis experts. We've also had other agencies that specialize in these types of investigations in terms of anonymous notes and written language and things like that.
Now, thanks to advances in technology, detectives believe they may be closer than ever to solving this case.
At this point in time, we have a significant direction. New DNA analysis has been done with new technology, and we absolutely believe that that will lead to an end for this case. Nothing's going to bring Greg back. He was always killed in the prime of his life. All the things that he could have done and should have done and was going to be are no more. But I believe it gives a direction, and the thing that I'm excited about is that his children, his family members need that direction. In my personal opinion, it's a direction for someone that ultimately they would like to forgive.
If you have any information on who hit and killed Gregory McRoberts, contact the Midland County Sheriff's Office. For 9 and 10 News, I'm David Leiden.
Linda was down at Chum's Corners around April 19th at some bars around Chum's Corners.
It's April 19th, 1989. 41-year-old Linda Mateer is spending the night out with friends in Grand Traverse County.
They were socializing at one bar. They left that one bar and then went to one of the witnesses' homes, then went back to another bar. They were hoping to get at the bar they finally ended at to do some line dancing classes, but that had already ended, so they weren't able to do that, so they just sat and socialized at that bar. She was last seen on April 20th, leaving one of the bars. At that time it was called Spike's Peak, Northern Lights. After April 20th, she was not heard from again.
Linda's body wouldn't be discovered until the 27th by mushroom hunters in Hoosier Valley.
When the body was found on the 27th, they had no idea who it was. So at that point, law enforcement was trying to identify who this person was. I believe on April 28th, they were actually able to make an identification that it was Linda Mateer.
So she was beaten, hit multiple times.
She had a lot of blunt force trauma to her torso and some around her jaw.
Linda's death would be ruled a homicide.
They looked at the injuries, because you're talking the autopsy was done as well around the 28th. They looked at those injuries, then they started talking to some witnesses about where she was at and the fact that they hadn't heard from her for that number of days.
Detectives formed a sizable task force to begin looking into what happened to Linda.
They started looking at where she was at that night. So they were talking to all the patrons of the bar, anybody that might have been in that bar that night, family, friends, co-workers, multiple people.
Did they say anything seemed off? Were there any arguments, anything that would have tipped them off that something was wrong or potentially going to go south for Linda that night?
When you start looking at the last couple hours of the evening, she's just at the bar with a friend and she's having a good time.
Even with dozens of interviews and a lengthy investigation, detectives were never able to successfully identify and charge a suspect.
Honestly, I think it came out there was no one that really said I did it, or anything that was pointing towards this person had a significant involvement in how she died.
Despite years of setbacks without a breakthrough, detectives believe now is the time they can solve Linda's case.
A lot of times you want to not just focus on a couple days before and a couple days afterward. You want to look what is their pattern of life. So we're kind of digging into what may have happened a year before, 6 months before, or after as well. But we're kind of looking at it from different avenues. You know, we're looking at all the evidence that we have, you know. We're reviewing all the reports as well. Linda was a mother of 5 at the time in 1989. She's since had a son pass away, her mother's passed away, not knowing, you know, who killed their mother or their daughter. The family deserves to find out what happened to Linda.
If you have any information about what happened to Linda Mateer, get in touch with the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office. For 9 and 10 News, I'm David Lyden.
From what I remember as a young girl, she was fun. She was a good mom.
The bond between mother and daughter is a special one, a bond no doubt shared by Victoria Bennett and her mom, Diane Chorba.
She loved kids. I mean, she was probably the favorite aunt when she was alive to a few of my cousins. And I don't know, I think she died too young. She's too young to know what she was all about.
Victoria was 12 years old in the summer of 1979 and still recalls many of the details surrounding her mom's disappearance.
My parents ended up separated for a time. They lost a child in '74. My sister was 6 years old when she passed away she had pneumonia, and they kind of blamed each other for that. So I think that was the demise of their whole existence together. They kind of blamed each other, and this man, Clarence Bean, that my mom and my dad knew was part of our lives. He was my father's employer, and I think he took advantage of the fact that they had problems, and my dad would be sent out on the road and mom would be left home. They had a child together, and she was pregnant again with his second child.
Victoria says Bean was at her home the morning her mom went missing.
The bedroom door was closed when I left for school. I remember saying goodbye to her through the door, which was not usual. Usually there was a hug, kiss goodbye, you know. And went to school that day, and I came home and when I was getting off the bus, I seen Ollie's wife Judy's car, or van, in our driveway. It was a van, and I seen, what really caught my attention was there was smoke burning in the trash can, and the outside trash barrel was something that we didn't do.
Victoria then remembers being told her mom had gone to Reed City and would be back later that night. When her mom didn't return, she was told she was on an American Airlines flight that crashed in Chicago.
That was a story that Ollie and his wife made up to buy time. So there was no investigation or looking for my mother for almost over 2 months. And at that point in time, they had cleaned out our home and packed everything up and took it to their place and boxed it up and put it outside in a storage area. And that was it.
Chorba was reported missing in July of 1979. Bean was eventually convicted of killing her in the early 2000s. He later died in prison. But Chorba's body has never been found. That's the part of the case Victoria is still trying to solve.
Did Ollie say that you'd ever find your mom's body?
He did. He said I would find. He said they'll find her. If they look there, they'll find her.
Did Ollie offer any clues or say anything to you about what he did with the body, where he left it, and
Yes, he did.
your efforts to
Yes,
find
he did.
it?
Yes, he left a confession with the correctional facility inspector. And he told us what he did with the body, how he murdered her, how he wished that he hadn't have done that, and told us where we would be able to find the body. So we have been searching those areas. It's one area. He had a job there.
But exactly where that is remains a mystery. Victoria believes it's somewhere in the woods of Lake County.
So there were jobs throughout that we have searched, which is all the way up here would be Wexford County. We've searched a lot of areas. I'm guessing over 30, 40 miles. I don't know how many miles with ground penetrating radar through 2 tracks, forest. If she's where I think she is, it's beautiful there. And she is part of that forest now. So if I took her out of there, I really would be taking her because it's been 45 years. She is part of everything surrounding that area, if you look at it in a scientific way. And I know that I probably wouldn't be getting much back. And that's not even the important part. It was just knowing that she was found. And I didn't leave this on for generations after I'm gone, you know, for my children or any of my family to deal with.
If you have any information about where Diane Chorba's body is, contact Michigan State Police. For Unsolved in Osceola County, David Leiden, 9 and 10 News.
She was always just super nice every time I had, talked with her.
Marvel Anderson was everything you'd expect a 16-year-old high school student to be. Dave Massey was one of Marvel's classmates at LaSalle High School in St. Ignace.
Smile, huge smile. I know, they say she had a smile lit up her room, but she really did. And if you ever see any pictures of her, you see that.
The afternoon of May 2nd, 1994 ended like so many others had for Anderson. Last seen leaving LaSalle High School and heading to her home on Glashaw Street. She was later reported missing by her mother.
What do you remember about the day after she went missing?
Yeah, it's a tough one, just because it was so long ago. I remember everybody just being, initially we just thought she maybe ran away.
Police thought the same thing, believing Anderson, who was 5 months pregnant at the time, had willingly run away from home. Detective Sergeant Gary Demers now heads up the investigation into what happened to Marvel.
There were some messages, some notes that were left at her home for her mother, and information from different friends in the area that led investigators originally to believe that she was a runaway.
Then, in September of 1995, this case took a drastic turn.
The following year, bear hunters in a portion of Mackinac County discovered human remains in the woods that ended up being identified as those of Marvel Anderson. There was evidence at the scene that led investigators immediately to believe that this was a homicide.
Almost a year and a half had passed between Marvel being reported missing and the discovery of her body.
It really allowed whoever may be responsible for her homicide to get a good jump start on law enforcement, and it caused law enforcement to be delayed for a fairly significant amount of time to make that transition between a runaway and a homicide investigation.
So what happened to the vivacious teenager with that unforgettable smile?
Investigators chased down every lead that they had. They interviewed tons of people. They interviewed dozens and dozens of people. There were potential suspects that were named and eliminated, others that were named and have not yet been eliminated. So they did extensive interviews. They conducted searches of property, of evidence. Evidence that was seized at the scene was forwarded to crime labs for analysis.
Then, in 2008, that evidence got a second look.
The detectives are going out, doing fresh rounds of interviews, interviewing people a second time.
There was also optimism new technology could generate new leads.
With some of the advances in DNA technology, with some of the advances in police methods, and the ability to pull together veteran detectives, hopefully now is the time we can move this into the solved column.
And that hope remains today.
We'd also love for people that may have knowledge of what happened to Marvel to come forward and be willing to talk to us. We're very confident that there are members of this community that have information that might help further the investigation, and we'd love to talk to them.
It'd be a little bit of closure for the town, and I just think it would be a great thing, healing, a lot of healing.
Jacob is a It's hard. 14 years is not, it was today, it was yesterday, it was not 14 years ago, you know, it was so recent.
March 31st, 2010 is a day Sandra Cranston has lived over and over again for 14 years. For her brother, Jacob Kavanaugh, it was a day like so many others.
He went disc golfing with some friends, and what I was told is after disc golfing, he was invited out to go hang out at the open space or do something else with the friends, and he said, no, I've got homework to do. He was a student at NMC, so he was heading back to our mom's house where he was staying at the time, and dropped friends off at open space.
It's after that drop-off at the open space in Traverse City that the mystery of what happened to Jacob begins.
The next morning, when my mom called me and said Jacob never came home last night, she called Dave's garage where he was employed at the time, and he did not show up for work. And so that was all against his character. And that's when she said, something's definitely wrong.
Jacob's son, Xander, was just 6 years old at the time.
I've got memories from parts here and there, but overall he's definitely left a lasting impact on me with certain activities like disc golfing, skateboarding. I do know the day that he actually disappeared, I was off on vacation at my grandma's, and when I came back, I think they even waited a while just to, you know, make sure that if he was gonna pop up, it would have been within the first few days.
According to a timeline from detectives, the evening of March 31st was the last time anyone would report seeing Jacob alive in Michigan. The timeline after that is truly puzzling. Detective Jason Pulzine is one of the investigators currently working the case for the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office.
There's one stop, he does hit a gas station in Traverse City, the Mutual Station, and then he goes down to Buckley. Then there's a gas station in Cadillac, and $140 was taken from an ATM. And again, that's another one, there was no video. His card was used, so we're assuming that was him.
At 2:04 the next morning, Jacob is seen on video buying gas at a Speedway station in Mattawan. His cell phone was pinged more than 12 hours later off a cell tower near Springfield, Missouri. Just after midnight the following morning, police in Hollister, Missouri run the plates on Jacob's car. Also that day, deputies in Washington County, Arkansas ran Jacob's plates and report that he's asleep in the car at a rest area in West Fork, Arkansas. It's the last time Jacob is definitively seen alive. His card was declined later that day in Ardmore, Oklahoma. It was used 2 hours later at an ExxonMobil in Fort Worth, then again in Sweetwater, Texas. That was the last activity on the card.
He pulled out cash in Cadillac, but even doing crunching numbers and to go from Mattawan, Michigan all the way to Oklahoma, I don't know how you get gas and meals on $140 cash.
He didn't take any extra clothing. He didn't take his passport, he didn't take his toothbrush, his car charger, anything like that. He didn't take it.
In 2017, the VIN from Jacob's car turned up, possibly at a scrapyard in Mexico. More recently, in 2022, detectives did a fresh round of interviews.
Time has passed, and there's people out there that they have their mind made up of what information they're going to tell us. And from an investigative standpoint, there's I'll just call it discrepancies in their stories.
All as detectives and Jacob's family continue to wonder what happened.
Still each breath.
Some closure just to finally know what actually happened. I don't know that the actual answer will be satisfying or something that I necessarily want to know or that's good, but I think I'd rather know than not know.
You stand like your dad.
I do.
You do, with your shoulders, and you just, the way you walk in and go, it's like you're here.
My mom's told me I have quite a few of his mannerisms.
You do.
Movements. Yeah.
I love that. Somebody knows something, and I just think that it's got to be eating at that person. They have to be wanting to come clean and just tell they're part of it. There's somebody out there.